Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I recently saw a video he made and I was shocked. He's in his 80s and still kicking butt and working out and staying active. He did this by just making one change. Chuck says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/inspired or by clicking on a link below this video. It'll change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/inspired or click on a link in the description below to watch the video now. If the legendary Chuck Norris can do this at 81 years old, so can you. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the description box below, chuckdefense.com/inspired.
We are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Hey, Inspired Drive, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Inspired live stream. It is Thursday, February 8th, 2024. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're whole, we're free. We're winning. We're winning. We have we have ways to go, but we are winning, my friends. I just wanted to remind you of this clip of the Mockingbird media. They're in full frenzy mode right now. They're going completely nuts. Everybody is weighing in on on something that hasn't even seen the light of day yet. The upcoming interview, Tucker Carlson, who went to Moscow, interviewed President Putin there, and this is going to air this afternoon. So today, Thursday, February 8th at 6 p.m. Eastern on tuckercarlson.com and on X, formerly known as Twitter. We will all watch it, right? There'll be probably hundreds of millions of people who will watch it. And so the media, the deep state, the political apparatus, all the players already went full into counter narrative, countermeasures, and it's only amplifying, I believe, what's coming out of this interview. And the stupidity of this is we're talking about a conversation between a world leader, absolutely one of the most powerful men in the world today, and a world-renowned journalist. And this is exactly what should happen. What should happen in a society is that journalists go into a hot zone and talk to everybody that's involved and get all takes, all perspectives, so the public knows what's happening. This is how it should be. So I think we might just be returning to such standards sooner rather than later. Today, we're going to dive deeper into the story of the Take Our Border Back trucker convoy that was rolling through the country last week. And the media did report on it. However, they didn't get the full story. They didn't get the real take on it. And apparently it was a very, very amazing, transformational, spiritual experience. And so we're so excited to bring back our dear friend, Lieutenant Colonel Doc P. Chambers. He is a 37-year military veteran. He was in the Army and later joined the Green Berets as a special operations surgeon, Purple Heart recipient, and just a wonderful human being. Our brother, Doc P. Chambers, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, brother, it's great to see you, John. It's always inspiring, when I'm with you guys, as your show says. But yeah, great to be here.
Oh, it's an honor to have you, sir. Thank you so much for everything you do and for taking the time today. It is inspiring. Everything you shared with us over the last days and weeks, it is truly inspiring. So you were an integral part of the trucker convoy on all levels. What happened? How did it happen? And what did we miss maybe from afar that went down in Texas?
Right. So this is really a total God thing, how this all rolled. I couldn't even have written this in a script. I'm going to give you the 40,000-foot view and just tell you what the convoy folks wanted to get out, which was, it was a grassroots endeavor to shed light on an open border policy that is resulting in second and third order effects of human trafficking coming across, slave trafficking, sex trafficking, these terrible things that I can't even talk about really without seeing the eyes of the children that I took care of on the border. But also, it's there's a chemical warfare going on in the form of fentanyl. There's the human osmotic pressure, push and pull of humans being used like pawns in post-war areas around the world, some of which the United States is responsible for heavily in pushing those people out of their homes. And so when we see all that stuff, the 40,000 foot view, what it results in is a chaos at the border. But every city, every country right now, or every county right now across America is a border county or a border state, because everybody's being affected by those second and third order effects. Now, dialing it down to the ground, I literally lit out of North Texas with a preacher to go set up his tent revival in a town called Quemado, Texas. About 48 people live in this. It's not even a township. And there's a Cornerstone Children's Ranch there. Great lady, Miss Lori. Everybody calls her Mama. And she takes care of orphans on both sides of the river. She's literally 400 yards from Mexico. And she helps the orphans. She helps out she travels back and forth with food. She has a huge food shelter there. She used to have a riding ranch for kids to come down in the summer, but they shut it down during COVID, so she couldn't do that. She lost her income. And so we were going down, Pastor Rod Parker and myself, to set that up. While I was on site, I got a call from Rod, from Jamie and Robert Agee, the Banners for Freedom folks, and said, hey, do you have a place where we can park all these trucks when we come down? We'll probably have about 100 vehicles total, because it was grassroots. It was just the message that they wanted. Everybody says, well, they didn't have enough trucks. It wasn't a victory. Look, the victory's the Lord's. Okay, number one. Number two, it doesn't matter, because when the media comes out and does some really vitriolic things to try to make them look bad, that then raised the level of what's going on here. Then the alternative bad guy media said, all right, well, let's mess this up. So they started posting things like, there are 700,000 trucks coming. There is Pete Chambers is sitting on the front of a Peterbilt, tractor trailer with a sword going, let's attack Mexico. You never know what they're going to say. And we didn't listen to it.
I think they're going through the Hollywood AI script writers.
Right.
Come up with the outlandish claims.
Yeah, that was awesome, because I didn't pay attention to it. I knew about those things happening. I really had to focus on my job, which was not the leader of the thing, even though that was also said. I led my particular piece. That thing went to 3 different locations: San Ysidro, California, Yuma, Arizona, and Eagle Pass area of Texas. Now, my role was as a liaison, really. I just made sure that what they were wanting to do got done. But I also had to negotiate with them, like, hey, don't go to Eagle Pass proper, because there's, National Guard operations going on. If there's even 10 trucks in Eagle Pass, you're going to change the pattern. And don't circle the Capitol. It's not necessary. You've made your statement about enlightening people and shedding light on also the unconstitutionality of all those processes. So they got that out, and that was important. And as the trucks were coming, and the vehicles, trucks and vehicles, mostly vehicles, as it was coming, let me tell you, it was glorious to see as it grew, and as this grassroots thing really took a face of its own. And I'm telling you, brother, what happened was God showed up down there. Now, in the background, for us, those that are the guardians of the night, our job is to make sure that nothing happens to these innocent people. And so there was a lot of work to do for us to liaison with the regional directors for the Department of Public Safety, so that they knew and they weren't scared by the media. They weren't, apprehensive as to who these guys are. And so what does that do? The second, third order effects of that are that off gases, if you will, the pressure, the concerns. Look at that. I mean, I was crying standing there watching this. I was giving a briefing to those folks as they were getting ready to go the rest of the way to the border. And I just couldn't hold it in, because they're just simple folks from simple places, all walks of life, just wanting their voice to be heard. And if that doesn't hit you right there, I don't know what does, because they have a right to do that. And my friends that I had downrange that didn't come home, that came home in a dignified transfer with that very flag at the top of that pole over the casket, that is the reason why they did that. Whether the war was right or wrong, the people that signed their name on the dotted line, which is cashed in a potential dignified transfer, that right there represents everything from the top of that pole to the bottom of those people's feet out in that field.
Yes, sir. And indeed it does. These are beautiful images. You shared them with us. And I wanted people to see a little bit of what this looked like, what it felt like maybe to be there. And it was also a successful operation in terms of making sure that it isn't interrupted, that it isn't co-opted, that it isn't infiltrated and turned into something ugly. But you said there were so many spiritual moments and so many encounters and people coming to share in, and big caliber people coming in that probably maybe weren't even expected. So something, I think you said at one point, something shifted. What is that? What do you think has shifted because of this convoy?
Well, there's a shift. There's a shift in my discernment. Okay. And then when your discernment meets somebody else's discernment, which is kind of your spiritual side, you have your spirit and your soul and your flesh, your soma. So all these three things are part of you. And when that spirit meets the other spirit, and I'm not talking about ghosts, I don't want to scare people. It's not, I'm not trying to scare you, but there's a discernment. You walk up to this person, right away, without saying a word, they understand. And then you just quickly go into action. Look, I was a soldier for most of my life, 3/4 of my life. And so all I know is that world. But as I learned this world, and I'm new to this, the last shall be first, it says in the book, it's written, and the first shall be last. So, us that are latecomers, sometimes we just take off and we figure the discernment thing out quickly. At least I did. So now I'm watching this shift. And so how does that look? Well, that looks like some of the Tucker Carlson. Let's just use that for example. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. He posted something about the border. Where's the men in Texas? I responded to it. He didn't hear me. But other people that I knew on the mid-level media, people like the Ann Vandersteels and the Lara Logans and all that said, talk to Pete Chambers, by golly. Okay, well, he calls in this room right here. I walk in with a coffee in my hand, wearing my Ranger shorts, tight, running pants, not real proud of them, but it's morning. I just woke up. I got my hoodie on, got my watch cap on. It's cold. I got my coffee, and Phil Waldron, who owns this place, says, hey, man, got Tucker on the phone. He wants to get you on the show. I said, oh, yeah, the guy that said that, where's the men in Texas? Why don't you tell him to get down here and get on a horse and come see? I'll show you where we're at. But from that, I was able to go on there, dispel some rumors, off-gas some of those lies, concerns, fears, provocateurs, and then say, okay, guys, circle up the team. After the show, they realized this is going to reach a lot more people, and it did. And that's God's intervention right there. You can't say anything otherwise. I mean, I'm walking in while the guy's on the phone with Phil. Come on,
It's right. Incredible. Doc, you also shared a story about some counter protests and people who were kind of gaslit into coming and disturbing the whole thing. And he said, well, God has a funny way of showing up, right? So what happened there?
Well, the typical weather pattern in Texas in the wintertime is from the north to the south. It's the northern. So, I mean, it's pretty much everywhere in the country, but definitely in the flyover states, many plain state north of us, wind comes down from the north. Literally that day, there was a protest that was set up in two places. One in Eagle Pass by the wire that was set up by the National Guard. And that was the Maverick County group that was, very upset that they were coming. And then 120 miles north of there at the camp at Quemado. And they were waiting there because they really didn't know where they were going to go. They thought, oh, they're going to sneak over here and go to Eagle Pass. They didn't. Sorry to ruin their party. But the party that was taking place there was a counter-Christian nationalist movement. And they had a really nice van and trucks themselves with all kinds of wraparound on the trucks. And they were out there with their signs, protesting the Christians. And the convoy took a little longer to get down there because it's a convoy. There was about that time about 200 vehicles in all, about 25% were big trucks. And when those trucks were coming down, by the time they hit Uvalde, which is a little city just on the way to the border where unfortunately that school shooting took place, they were rolling through there. I was coordinating with the Kenny County Sheriff saying, hey, can you now pick them up from there? DPS is going to pull off, Raj. Okay, so I'm doing that with my whiteboard. While that's happening, there was a big storm that came from the southwest, cut right across there, and it was a hailstorm. And there's some funny footage, which I don't give out because I don't want to, besmirch people that have, a voice in the First Amendment. But it was kind of funny to watch in that they ran away like, the scene from Monty Python, run away, So they're all running to get in their trucks, and they took off. And then the convoy, which was behind because it's a convoy, they can only do about 40 miles an hour. It took a couple, 3 more hours to get there. And they got there and there was no protesters. It was that picture where you saw in the beginning with the guy on the horse. That's when they were coming in. He led that in with that flag, that his glory flag. So, then people were like, what is that flag? Is this some kind of movement? Is that some kind of Christian nationalist thing? No, it's just a flag that says his glory on it for God. But
is that some kind of, do you love God and do you love your nation? Well, just damn you. What's
right. Well, and I got a hit because I had done a piece on the December the 18th down at Eagle Pass when 12,500 people from Venezuela showed up, came across the border illegally, and they had swamped that Shelby Park. Well, I was there that day and I was talking to the National Guard guys, actually friends with them. They're my former unit. And we got some pictures of it, and I took a knee, and somebody was there, needed just a quick spot on what's happening. I gave him that roll up, and then I said at the end, look, I used to be in the Army, U.S. Army. I took off that uniform. I put on the armor of God. I'm in the Army of God. They took that and ran with it, and they were like pictures of me going, he's in the Army of God. Google it. Let's see where this is. What are these people doing? And I had to say on a subsequent response to that, I said, well, I learned about that in Sunday school. It's not really a club. I mean, it is, but it's not really something in paper. You can Google it, but maybe you should Google it and read the book that's all about it. And then maybe it'll help you understand the Army of God. And perhaps maybe one person read it, and that was a seed that was sown. So God bless their hearts.
Good Lord. Well, Doc, I know you told me you also had some concerns from across the river that some nefarious, gang members might come in and disrupt things. What happened there?
Right. So when we get information, and a lot of this came from citizen journalists on the U.S. side, but when we get information from the other side, and we're not getting anything from the red side with the military anymore, we don't have access to that. But when we have friends across the border that say, hey, we're seeing some activity over here with the cartels moving around your camp, which is not really a city there, it's just a bunch of woods and hills. Well, then we kind of have to say, well, how do we then mitigate that? And I don't want to give the sources and methods because we may be doing futures of these events in the future. But I think that we have to mitigate that. So we conduct a risk assessment. This information came directly to me from somebody I completely trust. I didn't need to measure 3 times. And I enacted a countermeasure, if you will. And this is how that looked. Talk to the local cops in Mexico and say, hey, bro, look, can your guys just sit across the river for us and just make sure that nothing bad happens to those Christians that are, it wasn't just Christians, it was Americans. I mean, I say that there were a lot of people in that convoy that they weren't there because of religion. They were there because the border's wide open and we needed to shed light on it. Of course, it took that turn because it went to marry up with the pastor from North Texas that I took to that camp to do this tent revival. So all of it kind of married up together. It was a God thing. And that's another confirmation to me that it was the right thing. And I've taken a lot of hits over it. I don't mind the naysayers, the cowards. Look, there's this guy named Thomas Paine, and he wrote this thing called Common Sense. And if there was to be a party in this country, not the Uniparty, but if we were to have a party called the Common Sense Party, I would love to run that thing. Not the front of it, but the back of it, and just make sure that the words of Thomas Paine that talk about the summer soldier and the winter soldier, the soldiers that went across with Washington through the frozen river, those people that are willing to do those hardships, but it's easy for those armchair quarterback people. And there was one I talked to this morning about this. I said, bro, you were calling us out saying we're naive. Do you think that we're not going to do our due diligence to protect these Americans? Of course we did. And it wasn't just me. It was law enforcement and we the people and the citizen journalists. This was the combination to this winning recipe.
It's interesting. You mentioned the winter and the summer soldier and kind of those good weather, good weather soldiers. But when the rubber meets the road, they're not to be found. But in Thomas Paine's day, that was probably really a literal thing. I mean, you're talking about literal soldiers mostly, but today we're in a new kind of war. We're in a different kind of war, and a lot of people don't realize they are on the front lines, online, on social media, and in other spheres where so much of this information and spiritual warfare is happening. Now, with regards, your heart's really with the border situation, but your heart's really with the people. It's not about politics. We've had many conversations. This is bad for everybody. It's bad for the good people coming in. It's bad for the people who are already in this nation. It's certainly bad for the women and children who are horrifically being trafficked. I mean, there's just for the drugs that are coming in, for the fentanyl that's coming in, for all those things. What is it that you think will develop out of this particular convoy, and how can people support, let's say, a movement toward something better, toward betterment on all areas?
Yeah, so that's a multi-faceted question, and I love those kind because it really helps us develop the 40,000-foot view, which is that in the absence or void of leadership, bad leadership will show up. They always do. They strive for that. Look, I'm the guy that says I don't want to be in command. I want to be able to lead the guys on the ground. And when General Flynn told me, he's somebody that I work with from time to time, discussion-wise, he said to me, just keep doing what you're doing and be the sergeant on the ground, because they need that. I don't need to be the general. I need to be the sergeant on the ground because I feel the dirt. Like I pick up the dirt and I feel it and I know what it's like and I can do that. So I take that dirt, I marry up with this upper level stuff, and the weakness in that void of leadership is a vacuum. And so that is where we need to get off the politics talk and onto the governance talk, because governance is what's godly. Governance was blessed. When we talk politics, we're not really talking about anything that's real, that's very optically driven. And the whole border response, about 75% of that has been optically driven. There is a reality. Yes, there are people pulling a post 24/7, 365 on 1,250 miles of Texas border. I got that. Those soldiers are doing a great job. That's the Texas National Guard. There are border patrols there. Their leadership has got a void in it as well, which are saying, don't do your job and just process these people. So as we start bringing this up from the bottom now, that dirt from the bottom, those roots, the grassroots, now the grassroots of America will unite underneath us and move upward as we start hitting it from the top down with governance, which means we've got to focus on obviously our local leaders. We focus there because that's the grassroots of this, but we can't forget about those that make the decisions that ultimately their second and third order effects are opening this border wide up. Because recently on the Hill, we heard about this bill that spent more money for the Ukraine than it did for the border, but it was a border bill. Like, how ridiculous is that? In the common sense party, that wouldn't happen. So Thomas Paine would be rolling over in his grave right now saying, what are you doing up here? Governor or Senator Langford from Oklahoma, who pushed this thing. Like, I don't mind calling people out when you do stupid things, because that's exactly what that's going to result in, is more money for wars downrange, which now, when you look at that side of it, the war hawks, they're all charging forward. They're not physically doing that. They're making guys like me do that with swords, running towards Moscow, when right now you got Tucker Carlson conducting diplomacy, if you will, because nobody else will talk to him because they're afraid to hear the truth. That's what Tucker's doing. Tucker is acting as the red phone of America right now, saying, hey, let's off-gas this problem before somebody launches nukes. So you see all these different multifaceted things that are happening in this whole microcosm of, really, it's just about we the people. And the center of gravity for me and my guys in Green Berets is not infrastructure. It's not weaponry. It's not military industrial complex. Let's build them up so they can make more shares and congressmen can get rich on the Hill. What it is for us is center of gravity. Here's a mathematical equation, equals people. That's it, right? They just want joy. And the joy stealers are out there to try to take it, whatever form that is.
Doc, you mentioned earlier a common sense party, and I think a lot of people kind of vibe with that a lot and can align with that. And there's many voices who are coming up, especially around this border discussion, are saying, well, look, the United States has, over the last decade, century, you will, invaded a lot of countries, a lot of unjust wars, a lot of millions of deaths that probably were completely unnecessary, never should have happened. And and they go further back. They go, hey, remember how this country was settled, or how it was overtaken. Remember what happened to the natives. You have native roots. There's a bigger discussion that is emerging around this, and there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, this is kind of this is karma. This is what happens. Now you're experiencing it, and you could. There's a legitimacy to some of those arguments, but where we stand is, okay, are we just going to stand here in defeat and self-hatred? And go, okay, we're just going to allow this to happen, and nobody wins in this. Nobody wins. Right. What is a common sense approach to acknowledge these facts, some of these facts, but also find healing ground so we can actually move forward for the benefit of everybody involved?
This may sound a little esoteric, but you have to understand that there are 3 phases of this operation, and the word for each phase is love, love, and love. Okay, that's where we have to start operating in. I mean, I know people, I've heard people fault me for saying, well, this Green Beret is not very tough because he talks about love. Well, understand there's this thing also called tough love, and that we can exercise that as well. We don't want to. So what we want to do is there's no common sense party right now, but we will continue to do this, right? As we are captured in this Stockholm syndrome of the last several years, and probably more than that, but overtly watching our Constitution slip away. And then when you listen to that clip that you had of all the newscasters all saying our democracy is in jeopardy, well, guess what, folks? Every single one of you is wrong, because it's a republic. It's a constitutional republic. So yeah, then you're talking about something. And what is that called? That's called a Hegelian dialectic. We keep focusing on that. It changes everybody's verbiage. And then at that point, I guess let's look up what democracy is. And then, well, I guess we're willing to accept that. And then the next time that we hear about it, it'll be our communist dictatorship is in jeopardy. And everybody will be looking that up and going, well, I guess we should be a communist dictatorship. I mean, 20 years from now. So that's how you usurp those things over a long-term campaign plan. But for us now, if we are going to come into this race, which let's call it a marathon, the other side was already at the 23-mile mark when we figured it out. So what do you got to do that? You're going to catch up. Well, you ain't going to sprint 23 miles, but what you're going to do is you're going to hand the baton off, and you're going to be doing a 4x400 for the next 25 miles, so that 26 miles, so that you can win this thing. Because if you don't, at the end of it, it's going to be Venezuela. It's going to be Cuba. It's going to be sub-Saharan Africa as far as the governance issue is concerned. Because if we're focusing there right now in this discussion, then that's where I have to focus. And it's not political. So the party should just be, if you have a party at all, I don't think you need a party. The Politburo is what the communists called their party. We don't need that. What we need is just common sense people just to go say, all right, we're going to run for office independent and be whatever. You can call it libertarian. I love those folks too. But the point is that we're not going to allow this corporatocracy or these privateer corporation driven folks to play that game anymore. Because down in Texas, what the elitists play polo, we don't play polo. We play rodeo, and that's real, right? And that's really the way I look at it.
Well, yes, sir. It most certainly is not polo. Yeah. Well, Doc, what's next? You said this trucker convoy might have sparked a whole movement that will continue going, and there'll be more. You said there was a positive response from law enforcement. Yes. Yeah. So is there anything in the works, and how was it with law enforcement? I think it's interesting to hear that there was good collaboration. And
yeah,
so what's planned?
I'd like to elaborate on that, because that'll help people to understand how they can do their techniques, tactics, and practices with their law enforcement. Because look, I'm just a citizen too. I don't have any special clout, except for I knew a lot of them from the border operation when I was in uniform. So what I saw was, and I'm going to use a famous battle. I tend to, think of this. I'm a military history guy. So there was a battle in World War II, World War I, 1918, in a place called Ypres. I'm probably saying it wrong. I don't speak French very well, but Ypres, Ypres. Mm-hmm. So this battle, the Germans came in and pushed a really big bulge in the line. There was less French and less English on the battle line. So they pulled it into an area what they wanted to fight in, which was three-sided, land that was built up, so that the terrain features were sufficient for them to be on the high ground as this big bulge pushes into that high ground, between the high ground. Then you have them surrounded on three sides, right? So what were the three sides in this operation here? It was the law enforcement, it was we the people, and it was the former military guys and really just some citizens that never had experience at all, but had marketing skills, that had administrative skills, that had information operations skills, that had technology skills. So we all got together and we said, how are we going to protect this thing, right? So now we're the three sides of that battlefield because the people behind us are the convoy we're trying to protect. And here comes the bad guys. And the bad guys look like Mockingbird Media. The bad guys look like some law enforcement that, was just saying, well, they shouldn't even come to Texas at all. Well, those are cowards. They're not constitutional. They still have to protect their people by the doctrine of lesser magistrates. Look it up. It's a thing. Mark Prahala writes about it. Now you got that all happening at once. And then how did it happen now on the tactical level on the ground? Me calling up the former regional director he still is down on the border, and me telling him when I worked with him, hey, look, bro, it's Doc. He's like, what are you doing? I saw the news. Like, you got 700,000 trucks coming into Texas. I'm like, no, I don't have anything coming in Texas. These people do. I'm the liaison. Let's solve this. He's like, he took a deep breath, like, okay, thank you. Because he thought, I can't handle 700,000 trucks on my highways right now. So that's how that looked. Now you off gas that pressure. They come into you and say, okay, now how can we help you? So then I've got convoy escorts in the form of DPS trucks, Department of Public Safety, from Beaumont on Highway 10 all the way to all the way to Dripping Springs, where the rally took place, the pre-rally, and then the rest of them went down back roads, and then the sheriff picked them up there off the main highways. So that's how that piece worked. But that's just so you know the tactical. But then the other pieces, the regional director for the Austin area, I talked to him and said, hey, listen, I know they say on their website they're going to drive around the Capitol. I just want to let you know that I talked to them. They didn't see a need for it. And of course, he called me immediately, like, thank you, Pete, because I'm trying to figure out how am I going to run traffic with 700,000 trucks coming in downtown Austin. No, it's not that number. There's about 25, a little bit less. You don't have to worry. This is Grassroots. Their victory is just getting here. And the victory happened in the media side of the house, really, in this side of the house, because it wasn't the actual numbers on the ground, although about 7,000 people were involved totally. Really, it was about, and it was way more than they thought they'd have. But it was about exactly what we're doing right now, calling out those that would be subversive or would be instigators or provocateurs. It called them out. Look, we still have the names. We gave them to law enforcement. The citizen journalists called us and said, hey, check it out. So there are intel operations saying, hey, there's a guy outside the gate here, Kimato. He's a bad dude. Like, here's his name. Here's his picture. I call up law enforcement and say, here you go. Here's this dude. And they're like, we've been looking for this guy for years. Well, he's down there. Well, how'd you guys get him? Citizen journalist. Okay, there you go. That's how it works.
I love that. And this is, we have the Mockingbird media. We also have the mainstream alternative media now that is also running sort of, kind of in the center of things and not really willing to look beyond certain borders or beyond certain topics. Doc, this is happening here, and America, is also not known, or the American people, and especially in the conservative side, if you will, are not necessarily known as being protesters and people go out on the streets. They want to live their lives. They want to be left alone. They want to do their work and be with their families and go to church and whatnot. But they are more and more willing to show up for each other. And I think also show each other, okay, this is our line, and we're not supporting what's happening anymore. But we're also seeing interesting movements all across Europe and probably in other parts of the world. We're seeing the Irish are on the streets. We're seeing the German farmers and the small business owners, the Italians, the French, you name it. They're all out there. And it's not about just a tax hike, right? It's not about just one issue. It's enough. How do you view those movements? And do you think there's sort of a interconnected spiritual thing that's happening that's driving this?
Okay, so I view those movements much as a harbinger during the French Revolution. Talked about a guy named Frédéric Bastiat, and he wrote a book called The Law. And in that book, he talked about that if you leave it to mankind to govern and it turns to politics, their outcome will be called legal plunder. That's just what they do. They find ways to legally plunder. So you see higher and higher taxes. Well, the taxes without representation is what the 1776 thing is all about. So we don't need to get there. I've seen civil wars. I've been involved with civil wars, and it's ugly. We don't need to get there, and we won't, because if we do our job, it won't happen. But what we're seeing now is that result of what Bastiat warned us about, to say, and he wasn't talking about America. He was talking about France at the time. as that fiasco went underway. And this happened in every country throughout history, and history reflects itself sometimes 2 or 3 times within a same area, same continent, if you will. So you'll see that as battle lines are drawn and then country lines are drawn and redrawn and shaped, this causes the same problem set as the hard times, which result in hard men, and people, resilient people, then resulting in easy times, which then result in easy or weak people. And now you've got this cycle, and this cycle is followed because humans can't create any different kind of patterns. They just do the same patterns over and over again. It's the devil, in my view, that is using the resources of the media, because it's such a alluring thing. The thing you hold in your hand and you walk around with is such a alluring thing to take you away from the reality of life. When you see 2 people sitting that supposedly are married or love each other at a table and they're not talking and just looking at their phones, that's seductive, right? It takes you away from. So that's just a small scale. So you get up to the top scale, and it's the comfort. We're so used to comfort. I've worked in 50-something countries around the world, both ministry, volunteer, and then military, that there are people that chop wood and haul water to survive with no shoes, and they're just as happy as can be. So the joy doesn't come in the things. It comes in the work and the day at the end of the day. And we spoke about this the other day, of just going out and looking at the sunrise. And like me, I'm going to take off for a few days and get up in the mountains and just listen. But that's the joy. And sometimes it only comes in 15-minute increments. Over this last week, it was about 2 times I can recall where I just sat down and looked at Phil, and he looked at me and said, "We just need to have like a sip of scotch. I mean, this is a little rough." And it was about 10, 15 minutes of breathe. But that's how that looks. So now we're seeing this, and what connects us all, right? What really connects people? What connects people is something I call something I learned from a viejo caballero on the border, an old cowboy. And it was just the other day. And he said, I said, "Why are you still living here? You got the cartels literally coming right through your neighborhood here. You're not running any more cattle. You don't have any more horses." His house was broken down, his hacienda, the ranch. And he said, "Mis raíces están aquí." My roots are buried here, right? That's why I stayed here. And what are these roots connected to? Other roots, right? And if the other roots are connected to other roots, and water going under the ground, and it goes from sea to shining sea, as these people demonstrated from Virginia to San Ysidro. Well, if we just use that symbology of that man, that became my calling cry for this whole thing for us. And I started sharing that. Our roots are buried here. But then let's look at this. Let's take it down a notch. The Republic of Texas, which is still a thing. It was illegal annex in 1845. Even though it doesn't have any authorities, the Republic of Texas was a God-given piece of property, although fought for, as many nations are. There was before us Indians, before them, what was it, cavemen? I don't know. But all I do know is this, that they had a thing that was beautiful, and it was taken away from them by an illegal annexation. And this piece of property that in 1607 a cross was planted near Jamestown, and in the covenant that was made for this nation, that was a beautiful thing. It's still connected by the roots. And so when people take a stand like that and say, "My roots are buried here," when the farmers in the Netherlands or Germany line up some big old John Deere tractors that are rolling down the road and blocking the traffic, if that's what they're doing, that's what they're doing. Look, sorry it happened to you, bro. But that's their heart. That's where they're at with this. We are not as far because we're still comfortable to where they are right now. Their Nord Stream pipeline was busted, right? Somebody broke it. Blew it up. So that's their natural gas that was coming in from Russia. Well, Germany needed that for a couple different things. One, to create fertilizer, because you got to have food, and food does better with the fertilizer, although I think we could probably get away from that now. But also, it was what provides them heat. Well, now they're cutting down the Black Forest. So they are a little bit ahead of us in this. We've got to use that as an indicator, as a litmus test of where we could possibly be, because we could still go down to Starbucks as our primary concern for the day. But their primary concern is we got to feed our people. We got to be warm in the wintertime.
Oh my God, there's so much to be said about this. A whole new rabbit hole that could be opened about how the European economy really was built on Russian gas, on cheap Russian gas. But that's maybe for another day. Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers, a hero in my book. Purple Heart recipient, and dedicated to God, dedicated to the people around him, dedicated to this nation, and just an all-around wonderful human being. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, for teaching us, for sharing your wisdom, and for doing the work you do every day, sir. It's so greatly appreciated.
No, I appreciate you guys. Let's keep up the dialogue.
Yes, sir. And please let us know, where can people find you? Where can they keep up with you online?
You know, yeah, I'm a little behind on updating it. Just been busy, but drpetechambers.com, and it has ways to find the other things on there. So the Telegram, the X is just Doc Pete Chambers, or Twitter. But really, you know, that's just a place to share. So that's what I use it for, drpetechambers.com.
Perfect. Doc, thank you so much again. Please follow the Doc, keep up with him. He's also always putting out kind of CTAs, calls to action, which I love. So everybody can do their part and everybody can step in and apply themselves according to their skills and talents and inspiration. So Doc, thank you once again. It's always an honor. Thank you, sir. And Inspired Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. You know we love you. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very, very soon.